This is Shop Talk with Writers.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Shop Talk with Writers, the podcast where we discover the stories behind the books. I'm Elena Lappin, and my guest today is bestselling novelist Charlotte Mendelson to talk about her acclaimed latest novel, Wife. Charlotte Mendelson is also the author of The Exhibitionist, Almost English, and When We Were Bad, among other novels. In all her books, she dissects personal and family relationships with laser-sharp intelligence and humor, and in delicious prose. Wife is the poignant and painful story of a lesbian marriage, poetic, precise, and very funny. Charlotte Mendelson is also known for her astonishing garden, the subject of her column in The Observer and previously in the New Yorker magazine. We recorded this podcast at the author's North London home. Enjoy.
I'm Charlotte Mendelson, and I'm reading from Wife, my new novel, and I'm reading from a little bit, about a third of the way through. It's quite hard to explain what's going on because Wife is written in two time frames. One is over the course of a 20-year relationship leading up to the end, and one is in the course of the final day of the relationship. And this is a bit from the final day. And Zoe, the protagonist, is frantically packing. 10:06 a.m. The boxes smell of family celebrations, apple juice, sharing bags of onion bhaji flavoured potato snacks, iced party rings. Dawn is her best friend and sort of facilitator. Dawn has brought an optimistic number, is convinced that Zoe is underpacking. If it was a present, it's rightfully yours. Remember duvet covers? The good kitchen scissors, they're not cheap. Did you give away your seed packet? Gutting about your window boxes, she says kindly. Zoe presses her forehead to the window, gazes down at the yard. The stunted currant from the pound shop and lemon pip saplings, spindly sage and sluggy kale and pale salad, wild strawberry runners dangling like unkempt bikini lines from recycling boxes, each carefully lined to prevent chemical leaching with equally toxic but vaguely food-related polythene bags. They are filled with compost carried sack by sack on her shoulder like a porter from the hardware shop on Edith Road. She has spent, increasingly, every possible moment out here on what Penny calls her old man hobby. Penny is her partner who she's leaving today. You're sure there's nowhere to squish them at the new place? No chance, says Dawn. She became obsessed with medicinal herbs because of Rose's eczema, and the plant lust has stuck. The love she lavished on every feeble seedling riled Penny. She couldn't believe the effort Zoe put into aerating the thyme with gravel lifted, pinch by pinch, from the paths of Brook Green, or the Polish spirit clematis, in honour of her father, its roots insufficiently protected by 3 cobblestones stolen from outside the police station, and the unwell bay tree, and the tomato plant she'd found bravely self-sown in a paving crack by the Lyric. Penny referred to the yard as your boyfriend. To compensate for the growing mania, seedlings raised on the bathroom window, pots ever encroaching, Zoe had bought Penny a beautiful bench for the sunniest spot. The next year, a barbecue with accessories. But every February she kept sowing seeds, until this year. Penny noticed. Now the plants are her hostages, Zoe says. Not even my Greek widow geraniums. Why do you call them that, says Dawn. She calls them that. Bet you she never waters them, or strangles them individually, little garottes. Forget it, what about the bike? She bought it for my birthday, and presents are, sensitive. Most of my stuff is from her, let's be honest. But sod it, it's heavy, and why'd you have to choose one like a penny farthing, Christ's sake? Yep, you're leaving it, all right. The massive water jug's definitely yours. But it lives on the dresser, and she said I can't take things with the food processor. She never even cooks. She says Rose'll need it. Fine, leave it for now. That stool next to your bed. Tell me why you're not bringing one of her 2 sofas again, or the armchair. You know what? Screw this shit. Take the lot. You look ready to pass out. It's like when the kids were tiny, able to fall asleep mid-spoonful, and Zoe would want to do the same, anywhere flat enough, under plain seats, on the kitchen floor. She longs for that blankness again, but a more dangerous kind, at the wheel, in the bath, under a lead-poisoned eiderdown. Her flesh feels insufficient, her marrow exposed. How had she imagined she could manage this? She might as well have decided to swim the channel. She tries to explain that Penny will lose it about the kids' fridge photos, or anything at all of Rose's, will treat taking one of the rugs like a declaration of war. How will she stop you? Force?
Thank you so much, Charlotte Mendelson. Welcome to Shop Talk with Writers. And this reading that we just heard from the first third of the novel actually captures a really crucial moment. The story is about a marriage between two women, Zoe and Penny, although when we originally meet Penny, she is Dr. Penelope Carter.
Yes.
Am I right? She becomes Penny as they become involved. Penny is much older than Zoe. She's Australian. She's very exuberant, powerful. And there is a past and there is a present. And as you said in your introduction, this is the one day when everything ends. The crisis doesn't actually entirely happen on that day. The crisis had been building up. But on that particular day, there's a decisive moment. And what you just read is a preparation for that. And it actually captures some deep differences between these two women. Immediately you see that Zoe likes seedlings. She likes to grow things. She likes to cook. She likes to take care of things. And she knows that Penny hates all that, doesn't relate to it at all.
So true, yeah.
My question from the beginning of the novel, very, very, very beginning, even from the first moment of their meeting at a terrible music recital that Penny gave at her house. And Zoe at that time was a very shy graduate student, basically, who was morbidly shy, and her loneliness, having moved from Oxford to London, was just incredibly painful to watch. You captured that really, really well. How everywhere she went and everyone she met was basically a source of fear for her. How do I connect with this person? How do I get myself into this situation? And so she goes to this party. She's completely on her own. It is at Penny's odd bohemian flat where she lives with her girlfriend, Justine, and yet it begins their relationship. And that's all I will say about that beginning. But to me, from the very beginning, even from their first meeting, maybe because we've been trained by what we now know about narcissism, the red flags were everywhere. Is this something that you worried about when you set out to tell that story? How much to show about that condition, let's say, from the very beginning?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. It was a fine balance because I wanted it to be completely clear to the reader, but not to Zoe. So the point is that Penny is so glamorous, she's so confident, she's so assertive. She knows how to be sort of professionally, as a woman, as a gay woman, all sorts of ways. So she makes Zoe, who is shy and tentative and unsure of herself, feel this is how to do it. This is who to be. So we, the readers, are sort of almost like the grown-ups. We can see why Penny is not a good idea. From the first thing she says, you think, but also, I hope you can see why Zoe falls for her. It's just that we wouldn't.
Well, Zoe is also conditioned because she was raised by a narcissistic mother.
Exactly.
But a kinder, gentler version of...
Interesting. Gentler. I think the thing is that they're sort of two different incarnations. But you're exactly right. She was sort of groomed because of what her family was like. And then she meets, she's new to being a lesbian, she's new to London, she's new to academia, she's new to trying to be a grown-up, and Penny seems to have the answers, I suppose. And, it's at this recital at Penny's flat, as you say. Penny's there with her girlfriend and all her friends. And it's all, it's, yes, you're right, it's an odd flat, but it's a hell of a lot better than where Zoe's living. Penny's life seems unbelievably desirable. Not only does Zoe want to be part of it, but she thinks, oh, that's how one does it. That's what I should be doing. So, but then it's not, she doesn't choose Penny. I think Penny chooses her.
What's really interesting as well is that when you first describe Penny, she is impossibly glamorous, beautiful, interesting. I wouldn't touch her with a...
No, but that's because you're a grown-up.
But she seems just very attractive as a person and as a personality, but physically very attractive. But as the book progresses, she doesn't seem to be attractive at all.
That's interesting.
You hardly ever mention her beauty.
That's really interesting. So I think in the first sort of year or so of their relationship, or maybe a couple of years, her beauty, her desirability, her sort of sexual attractiveness, I do refer to. And for example, there's a moment, I think, so part of the thing is that so they are women, so it's very specifically about that, but it's also about, everyone's been in a bad relationship. It's about a bad relationship, and it's about how a relationship that looks good can turn really bad. And one of the things that complicates everything is they have children, which obviously is an interesting, complicated thing if they're two women. And there's a scene where when Penny is pregnant, she and Zoe are looking in the mirror. And basically they're both looking at Penny. And, of course, and Penny is still completely desirable to Zoe then. But I think over the course of the relationship, it's not familiarity. It's the sort of endless knocks. It's like the coffee jug over there. Everything gets more damaged and more damaged and more damaged and more damaged. And I think even by, nearly the end, Zoe's still desiring her, but desire has become so complicated.
It's more a memory of desire eventually, because I don't know if that was intended, but it becomes quite clear to the reader at some point that this wasn't just Penny falling in love with Zoe initially. It's almost an intended capture of a young woman to have children with.
Well, that was intended. And again, that was a delicate thing to write because, I think Penny did completely fall for Zoe, but only within her capabilities. And Penny was also raring to go to have children. And then here was this kind of wide-eyed, hopeful, clueless idiot who thought, yes, that would be great. What could possibly go wrong? So, yeah, I think it was... I suppose, one could say cynically, we all fall in love with people for our own purposes, don't we? And that was one of Penny's purposes. I don't think she thought, right, you'll do. But I think on some level she did think that, actually. So, yes, again, so much of the difficulty with writing Penny, although actually she was quite fun to write as well, was about capturing things like making her attractive enough to show why Zoe would fall for her, but it was also clear what's wrong, or exactly showing the different impulses for Penny as well, because I didn't want to do a sort of cartoon narcissist. I wanted her to be a real narcissist, and lots of people have said, oh my God, yes, that works, because I think if you've known someone like Penny, that is their charm, their beauty, whatever it is, their wit, their wealth, whatever the thing that attracts you to them, it really works.
And what complicates the situation in a very interesting way in your book is the fact that the father they choose for their children is actually the brother of Penny's former girlfriend.
Exactly.
Who is a very controlling character and really inserts himself in a... I mean, he's basically a human-level fascist.
I like that. As a family fascist.
Yeah, family fascist.
Well, he's a great big bully, basically. Yeah.
But in a very legalistic way.
Yeah.
And he convinces everyone that this is the only way. And initially, it seems innocent enough, or one could ignore it. Or hoping that he will not pay attention.
Yeah, he'll soften.
But actually every single detail of what he puts down, endless emails, endless conditions, endless plans, presented as a fair share of the times to be spent with the children, turns into an absolute catastrophe and a nightmare for Zoe. But not for Penny. And that was very intriguing. So I was asking myself, was that Penny's original plan to actually more or less ignore Zoe in all of this ultimately and form the family unit not with her?
That's an extremely interesting question. I think it's... So it's hard to talk about without sort of giving away various things, but I think it's hard... I think part of Penny's... I think part of what attracted Penny to the situation is that she was still quite entangled with her ex-girlfriend and loved her ex-girlfriend's family. And then the brother of her ex-girlfriend, I don't think it's a coincidence that he happens to be the ideal person.
And chosen over another man.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not to say that, they were tripping over alternatives, but I don't think it's a coincidence. And therefore, I don't think it's exactly that Penny thought, oh, hooray, we can do this and exclude Zoe, because I think when it all started, she couldn't imagine that the ending would happen as it happens. It's more that she would have the power this way. And also, they are both so much older than Zoe that it's very easy. It's almost Zoe's on a conveyor belt going, oh, this is great, what could go wrong, this is great. She's a lamb to the slaughter. And Penny will sort of say yes to anything because she's so desperate to have a child. Robin, as you say, a family fascist. So there's no one saying, hang on. And also, for various reasons, Zoe doesn't really talk about this relationship with other people. So, and I think in all...
As opposed to Penny,
who tells everyone. Yeah.
Although she always promises not to discuss this, not
Don't
to discuss
say a word.
that. But then Zoe finds out that, everyone knows. So no promises were ever kept. Plus, Penny has this whole world of friends, former, exes and friends, and, the whole sort of coterie of admirers. Who
and Australians.
Yes, they're all Australian. They all have the vowel. And they all exclude Zoe from that world.
Well, Zoe, in a way, I mean, if Penny was a man, I can really imagine, it could be a 19th century novel where, Penny is the Count of wherever, but maybe a bit less rich and princely than he'd like to be, with all his friends and his ex-girlfriends and things. And then, I mean, it's not Princess Diana, but it's a bit sort of, oh, you're a young person, you'll fit in with what I've decided. And it's incredibly easy that way to control what happens, because all you have to do is say, well, all my friends think this, and, Robin, the ex-girlfriend's brother, thinks this, and we all think this, and that's what's happening. And Zoe just has no idea that she has... So really, what this book is about, it's about a sort of second coming of age. Because it's about Zoe having to discover some agency. She has been caught up in this thing, and no one would ever expect it to be Zoe who leaves. And the fact that the sort of half of the book, roughly, is the day, the bit that I read, is the day of, will Zoe manage to get out? So even now, while she's packing with Dawn, her friend, they're listening out for Zoe's car, they're waiting for something to happen. to sabotage it. And whether or not Zoe is going to manage to get out is the sort of tension of that whole chunk of the novel, because right up to the end, it's possible she won't.
Yes, and you capture that brilliantly through Zoe's dialogue, because she speaks in unfinished sentences quite frequently throughout the book, but only at the end does she actually say things with a determination and a force, and she finishes her sentences because she means it and she has figured out how, not giving anything away, but the ending is a triumph, a narrative triumph.
Thank you.
And I just want to tell you, normally when I come to a podcast interview, I bring a book with millions of colorful little sticker notes like that, and they don't help because I never then end up finding what I really need. Well, this time I only had two. One was for your reading, and one was for my favorite sentence in your entire book.
Yes, I'm very curious and worried.
And this is this. There are unreliable narrators in real life, not only in fiction.
Yeah.
To me, this is the heart of the novel.
Exactly. That's what the novel... It's the heart of the novel, but it's also the point of the novel. As in, Penny has such a strong narrative about all the ways that Zoe is lacking and failing and a disaster. And all her friends agree, and Robin agrees, and everyone agrees. And everyone believes Penny, because Penny is charismatic and plausible. So the novel opens with a moment during the day of Will She Leave, when Zoe bumps into somebody who basically says, "Oh, so you're the devil, I hear."
Yeah.
And it's just because of what she's heard. And this is what I think is so interesting, that, and we all do this, that you hear, someone says, "Oh yeah, their ex, she's mad," or "Oh yeah, his ex-wife, she's a nightmare," and so you think, "Oh, nightmare," and you don't prod it. It's so odd. So in fiction, we totally believe in unreliable narrators, but when we are told an extremely binary version of what happened in a divorce, we just believe whoever we're talking to.
And not only in divorce, in many other situations as well.
Yes, absolutely. And so the point of the book is, okay, so there's this extremely plausible version of what happened, but this is actually Zoe's version. Here's what actually happened. And then, of course, yes, she's unreliable too, but it's left to the reader to say, okay, but these things happen because I'm reading them. I mean, it's obviously complicated, but I really wanted to show...
So if Penny had written a novel...
Oh my God, it would be Zoe is practically, a rapist and a murderer.
Yeah, but you see, that would be a very boring narrative.
I hope so.
because a narcissist's narrative is boring. It's very black and white.
I agree with you. That's such a clever thing to say. You're right.
And that is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
That's showing what's underneath. And what I found really interesting, Zoe comes to London from Oxfordshire. She grew up in
Headington.
Is that where you grew up? No.
It's a sort of...
But it's a real place.
It's a real place, thoroughly researched. I love doing my place research.
I've actually been there.
Have you?
I visited Isaiah Berlin there.
Oh my God. We have discussed this separately. Very cool. So it's this kind of weird suburb of Oxford, essentially, but it's a town in its own right. And lots of academics who taught at Oxford, especially in the olden days, lived there. So at one point it would have been a very, very... Well, when I say cool, I mean cool by Oxford standards kind of place. But the point is that Zoe's parents are both... Well, Zoe's mum is from London, and Zoe's mum was very glamorous too. And she is so angry that she's ended up in this suburb of Oxford with, lots of, naff brasseries and things, which are made up, I have to say. Any listeners in Headington now, I'm sure it's a great place. So it's about, one of the things it's slightly about is about the sort of the sexiness of the metropolis. So Penny came from very rural Australia, and she sort of pictured herself, in Elle magazine in the 80s, drinking a Cosmopolitan. London, if you're from somewhere rural, has or had this kind of thrill. And it's the same with Zoe. And also she was brought up thinking London is where it's at, but here we are in the suburbs. So that's again part of Penny's charisma, that she's been in London for, 10, 15 years. She knows everything. She knows where the pubs are. She knows where the restaurants are. She knows everything. And Zoe is just sort of going, okay, wherever, I trust you. I'll do whatever you're telling me.
Zoe's parents, Clive and Patricia, are, the ground from which
this terrible relationship sprang.
Yes, but she was raised to think and to feel that unless you please your mother and make sure that your mother is not hurt by anything, you're not a good person.
Absolutely.
And this is why she continues living like that in London. And with Penny, she knows how to play that role. So she saw an unhappy marriage, although in some way Clive, her father, is not unhappy.
No.
It kind of gives him pleasure to please his wife in every way. He thinks she's a big prize for him. He has to take care of him. She's a tender flower. She's impossible, but this is his fate, and he loves her. Very different actually from what happens to Zoe, because if Penny had been less of a nightmare, she could have gotten away with some of what she pulls. But because she actually is, I think, evil, to me, everything she does is just so calculatingly destructive and soul-destroying for someone she claims to love, that there's no excuse for anything she does. I mean, to me, she is much worse than Zoe's mother.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't exactly agree, because I think Zoe's mother is much more of a mess. She doesn't really leave the house. She's a very, very delicate flower, and sort of self-confessedly in a way. Whereas I think Penny is a mess as well. It's just that the way she deals with being a mess is by trying to destroy people who in any way threaten her view of herself as a marvellous specimen. So, I don't know, it's complicated, but I think that, and I don't think exactly that Penny is evil. I think she is an extremely bad person for someone sort of trusting and clueless to be in a relationship with. And she definitely has, there are moments in the book where I'm trying to show that there's more going on than I'm even writing down. Because you can't go into all just like you can't go into how much Zoe thinks she's beautiful and marvellous all the time, because it would just be boring. I'm thinking about the thing you just said earlier about how a narcissist's version of this would be very, very boring. Because I think with Zoe, I'm also trying to show Zoe is definitely not perfect. In lots of ways, she's weak. That's her problem. But at least she knows it. And she's not trying to visit it on other people. Because I think that's the point, isn't it? Is we're all messed up in various ways. But whether you try to be a good person or not, well, for me, that's the clincher.
Well, Zoe is not in any way destructive. The reason I use the word evil about Penny is that I honestly can't think of anything that she's done in this narrative that I would describe as good, because when it's good, it's only self-servingly so. It's never about somebody else. The world does not exist unless it's an extension of herself. And that to me is enough to define her actions as, what I said.
We would all run screaming from her, it's totally true, yes.
Yeah. I was wondering about something. So we have your paperbacks here, your previous books, Daughters of Jerusalem, The Exhibitionist, When We Were Bad, and every single one of them has a kind of different house facade on the cover with different kinds of vegetation and flowers kind of sprouting from its windows. There's even a snake I just noticed, but that's not, most of it is flowers or something growing. Do you remember how that idea came about?
Well, as always, you sort of have to wait and see what your publisher comes up with. And I was involved in describing the houses, as in trying to help the designer get exactly the right house. But I suppose I hadn't really thought of this before, but in all my novels, there's a really strong sense of a place, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that seems obvious, but to me it's a revelation. I love describing where people live, and it matters to me a lot being able to see it. And even when it's somewhere not especially interesting in itself, like, for example, Zoe's parents' house is just a kind of ordinary 19-whatever semi-pebble dash in Oxfordshire. And it's got one of those walls. But, for example, I had to Google there are these concrete... I'm drawing them, which you can't really see, but there are these sort of concrete bricks made in the shape of a sort of flower pattern in the wall, which are particularly hideous. Anyway, they've got them at Zoe's house. And I really love getting those details right. And I always draw a little picture of... Well, several little pictures, actually, of like a ground plan, a sort of area, all those things, because I really need to be able to visualise it, and I need to be able to visualise the people. Otherwise, I can't write about them.
That explains your X-ray vision in terms of describing everything in your book. Very interesting quality of your writing is that it is impossible to skim it. You cannot skim it.
Is that good?
Believe me, I tried because I was under,
so sorry.
time pressure. I had to, couldn't.
Okay.
You literally, if you miss half a sentence, you have to go back because everything connects and everything is described.
Everything does connect.
With this incredible precision, but in your really sharp-witted voice, so it's funny as well.
It does matter a lot. No one's ever said that before. I'm glad you think that, because I pack it in. Everything, because I teach creative writing too now, and I'm always saying to my poor, exhausted students that 80,000 words, say, seems like a lot. It's a hell of a lot when you're wringing it from your exhausted bones, but it's actually not many words in which to describe an hour in the life of one person. Mm-hmm. Life is so rich and so peculiar. So every phrase, every sentence has to count. So I'm really glad you can see that, because I really do want everything, every half sentence is for a purpose.
My poor husband, I kept quoting what I was reading now and then, and he said, "Oh,
go back to sleep."
He found it funny. So without knowing what it was really about. Poor man. But you mentioned you teach creative writing now, but you used to be an editor at Jonathan Cape and at Headline Review.
Yeah. 20 years I was a publisher.
How would you describe the process of going from being an editor to being an author? What came first, chicken and egg?
Chicken and egg, exactly, because I really wanted to be a writer when I was a teenager or a young adult, but it didn't occur to me that I could be a writer. So I went into publishing because I wanted to be around authors and around books. It didn't really occur to me to try anything else. I mean, I would have been actually the world's worst solicitor. No, I'm not scientific. There are so many jobs I couldn't have done, but I wanted to be near books. So I joined a publishing firm, and I was one of the worst assistants, I think, ever in the history of assistants. I was so bad at photocopying because I'm very, very, very unmechanically minded, and I'm very bad at remembering series of events. And I could never understand. I can't believe I'm admitting this now. I'll probably get sued retrospectively. I was so bad at... So I worked briefly for the publicity department, which was not for me. And because you have to be able to plan people's trains and things, and that is not... I can barely do it for myself. I had to photocopy all the articles every single day which featured anything to do with any of our authors. But that involved often magnifying or minimising the articles onto A3 or A4 paper. And I was so bad at it that regularly I'd have a stack about, say, 2 or 3 inches thick of misphotocopies, which I'd have to then go to a different floor and hide in a bin because I was so sure I'd get, practically arrested. I was really bad at that. And so, yes, I was an editor for 20 years. And then practically the day I stopped, I started teaching. And being an editor is a weird thing because it trained me to... I'm a really good editor of other people's books. I can see really often what's wrong with them and suggest possibilities about how to approach them. I can't do it for myself, of course. And also it meant I got to hang around with people who love books too, which was brilliant. But there were 2 big problems. One big problem is just me, which is I am really bad at meetings. I just want to amuse myself, really. So I wasn't very corporate. And also, it's really bad. So I started writing also when I was about 24. And if you work in publishing and you spend your entire working day in meetings, either being told, oh my God, it's all a disaster, this book has failed, this new book by this writer is terrible, oh my God, this book sold 3 copies, oh, it's terrible, or this book is the best book ever, we're going to pay £16 million for this book, all the other books are still okay, but this book's brilliant. Both of those options kills your soul. So then I would go home on my, say, day a week that I'd managed to claw from my job to write. And I'd just look at the computer thinking, what's the point? What can I do? So that wasn't good. Whereas teaching really suits me because I still get to talk about books. I still get to edit books. I don't have any meetings. I'm allowed to amuse myself because I'm in charge. And I don't ever have to hear about how badly or well books do. It's kind of the best bit of editing for me is teaching. Phew.
That makes perfect sense. And narcissism is not a topic in Wife, this novel, only, also in
The Exhibitionist.
The Exhibitionist, quite strongly.
Yes.
Would you say differently?
Differently. So the protagonist of... No, not the protagonist. The protagonist of The Exhibitionist is married to the narcissist. Yeah. So yes, that's an interesting theme. I've only just noticed that. But Ray, the husband in The Exhibitionist, is a sort of... Not failed as in he has failed. He's failed because he can't really be bothered to work. Artist. And his adult children and his wife and everyone sort of revolve around his ego. So it's different, a different sort of narcissist to Penny in Wife. And I was going to say arguably more malign, but I don't know if that's the case. He's messier. They're just different. And he's very shouty. Because I think it's really fascinating with both of these books. It's been so interesting talking to readers or giving talks because lots of people completely get it. They've known a narcissist, they've been in a bad relationship, or, with Wife, a big part of it is the whole sort of perimenopausal desire to have freedom or to have chaos or to have a life that you choose. And that's also what's going on in The Exhibitionist. Lucia, the protagonist, is at a point in her life where she doesn't necessarily accept the world that she's been stuck in. But so many people either go, oh my God, that's exactly it. Or not very occasionally, sometimes they say, well, why doesn't she just leave them? I went to an event in Budleigh Salterton and the woman in the audience said, I've never met anyone like Ray. And I thought, you have, sweetheart, you just have refused to let yourself see it.
You wrote an article some years ago about couples, artistic couples,
yes,
writers.
That was when The Exhibitionist came out.
Yeah. And in conjunction with the topic of narcissism, when you have 2 creative people, authors, let's say, in a marriage or in a relationship, would you say that both of them are narcissistic to a degree? Is it necessary to be creative?
Okay, so those are two separate questions. You're saying, is it necessary to be narcissistic to be a creative person? I would say, it depends who you're talking to. I mean, I know several. I don't have that many friends who are writers, but I mean, obviously they're my friends, so I like them, but they're not narcissists. Mm-hmm. They maybe have a sort of a confidence in a particular area or a strength in how they see the world, but they're not narcissists at all. But I've known many narcissistic creative people. But then, we've also, haven't we, known many narcissistic teachers or doctors or lawyers. I think it's more that a lot of successful people, or people who were successful for a while, or just people who are very damaged, are to some extent narcissistic. And I'm truly narcissistic, not kind of, insta narcissistic. And then the people who are their child or their sibling or their parent or their partner never forget what it's like. And that's why, for everyone who goes, why doesn't she just leave him? There are lots of people who go, oh my God, exactly that. Because once you know, you know. And I think it's fascinating people saying, why doesn't she just leave him? Because The Exhibitionist is a novel about the weekend before the moment when things might change, but things are already really changing over this very stressful weekend. Wife is a novel about the 20 years leading up to it. But in a way, both of them are novels about why people get stuck with really difficult people, or narcissists, or emotionally abusive. Because really, Wife is about coercive control, and to some extent, so is The Exhibitionist. So they're both novels about why intelligent, friendly, informed people can end up with really difficult people. Because we all know people who are lovely and clever and strong with awful partners.
But equally, I was wondering, so inside every narcissist is a very insecure person.
Yeah, poor babies.
So I was wondering, what would happen when two narcissists get together?
Well, fascinating.
And Penny does have some exes who I think fall into that category.
That's such a good question. I know. It's something I often wonder about. Is you kind of imagine it as sort of like, elephant seals crashing into each other on the ice floes. I think the thing is that...
How do they abuse each other?
Well, I think it's different levels. So I think with Penny's... I think the one you're talking about is Penny's musical theatre star ex. Probably Penny was a bit the Zoe in that situation. Mm-hmm. So Penny was a narcissist in training, paying homage to a greater narcissist. I think it would be impossible for two Penny-like narcissists or two Ray-like narcissists to get together. Because why would they be interested in each other? It's essential to have sort of underlings, servants, worshippers, disciples, if you're that kind of narcissist. So, and maybe if Zoe had been stronger, she would have left long ago. So I don't think you could have two Pennies. I think you'd have maybe a Penny Mark 1 and Penny Mark 2. I mean, thank God that we don't have the two, because it would be terrifying. But then I suppose, okay, here's an interesting question. If you think about, say, Hollywood, I mean, I don't know anything about Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, but maybe they were both narcissists, and then what happens? Well, I suppose then they get married and divorced several times over. Yeah. I don't know. It's not my area of expertise, but it's very interesting.
But what made you write this book, Wife?
What made me write Wife? Partly, it was that. Mainly, I wanted to write about a marriage because I am fascinated by how marriages have secrets, and people don't tell their friends, even close friends, a lot of the stuff that goes on. And maybe their friends can see it, but then they don't talk about it either. And I wanted to write about what happens, A, when a marriage goes wrong, and B, a marriage that starts off seeming happy. But I didn't want to write a linear, oh, everything looks great, oh, it's getting worse and worse. Because that's not kind of very interesting necessarily. What I wanted to do was find a way to tell the story of a marriage when we know from the very beginning, from the first line really, that it goes wrong. And it's a question of what were the points, what were the rumblings of disaster, what were the moments where you think, uh-oh, but maybe the protagonist isn't thinking it yet. And also, so novels like The Exhibitionist, I wrote from several points of view. But as soon as I realised that wife had to be from the point of view of Zoe, the kind of, the junior wife, almost for my own interest, I had to work out a structure which meant that it wasn't linear, because I knew I'd get bored. So I've almost got 2 points of view, but it's today Zoe and growing up Zoe. So that's why I wanted to write a novel about a marriage going wrong. But the other thing is, I wanted to write about lesbian marriage, a couple having children, because there is so much more fiction nowadays about queer people, gay people, all sorts of people. But I have never read a book about a couple who just are. And a friend of mine, one of the few lesbians I know, said to me a long time ago, there still hasn't been a big lesbian novel.
No.
Lesbians are always either kind of tweedy or titillating in fiction. And that was, maybe 10 years ago. But so I'd always thought, I want to write a novel about lesbians just as normal people. And I'm one. And eventually I thought, I've had lesbian relationships in my fiction, but I've never dared make a lesbian the protagonist.
I really admire that in this novel, the way you did it completely naturally. This is what it is.
Thank you.
Because it could be any other theme that people don't necessarily, spell out and write about. It's so important, I think, to give yourself the freedom to actually write a book about what it's really about.
Yeah, and thank you. It was really important to me to feel that I could. I know that sounds mad, but I thought... So actually, one of the incarnations when I was beginning it was a straight couple.
Really?
Yeah. And I think
what didn't work?
I think I thought, if I'm not going to write this, who's going to write this? I bloody can. This is not my first book. It's not my first rodeo.
This is your sixth novel.
It's my sixth novel. I'm bloody going to do this. And also, people are so interested. I'm a grown-up now, and the dozens, probably hundreds of times people have said, so, well, first of all, people always say, which is something in the book, which, I've always wanted to have a wife. By which they mean I want a household servant, really. People have such hilarious assumptions about lesbian relationships that it's this kind of idyll of fairness and nothing ever goes wrong and everyone is just lovely. But, one of the things I wanted to say was, gay people can be arses too. Just because you're gay doesn't protect you from being horrible. And gay relationships can be just as bad as straight ones. But also... people are really curious about everything from, lesbian sex, they still are curious, to how do lesbians have children? How does it work? What do you get called by your kids? Which one of you is the mother? All that kind of stuff. People ask
so
all the time.
interestingly complicated by the fact that the father either is or is not a figure.
Precisely.
Not just a sperm donor.
Yeah.
And if a relationship of any kind evolves from that, my God, it's so interesting to read a novel about that.
Exactly. And the thing is, too, that marriages are interesting. Marriages going wrong are incredibly interesting. I mean, we're all interested in why marriages go wrong. But when there are kids involved, there's much more pressure. And what I like writing about is people in sort of emotionally pressurized situations. And the thing that, I am obviously an advocate for openness, for gay families, for trans people, for everything that is other. But at the same time, the thing that so often, if I told people that I was in a gay relationship and had kids, people I suppose probably to avoid looking like they were naive and uncool, would kind of go, oh, wow, great. But the thing is that, of course, in any relationship, if you have kids, you've already got two grown-ups to deal with. As everyone knows who's been divorced, who has step-kids or half-kids or whatever, you know what I mean, half-siblings, it's more complicated when there's another grown-up involved. So the more grown-ups, the more complicated for the kids as well as for the grown-ups. So, and this is not, again, something that I've ever read about, because gay families are quite new, relatively new. And so I thought people are very naive about, oh, that sounds great. No. But why, you know, if a young woman had children with 3 older men, you would go, this sounds complicated. Are you sure this is okay? But Zoe can't talk to people about it. So I wanted to write about that too.
And really beautifully written are the children.
Thank you.
The 2 daughters, teenage daughters in your novel, Wife, are 15 and 13 maybe, or younger.
I don't quite remember where I settled because it was a fine balance. Teens, yeah.
And they get it. They just grew up. Yes, they grew up with it. And I think they've got this mum's number and that mum's number. They make choices, they make decisions. They obviously need to, you know, mature and figure it all out even more. Yeah. But there are things that are not phasing them as much as they would the previous generations.
Well, there are so many taboos even in that family in Wife, because Penny, not only is there the sort of enormous tension between the mother's household and Robin's household, but there's also huge unspoken tension between the mothers, because Penny can't really, you know, one of the things people are really curious about with lesbian mothers is how you sort of divide things up. So if one of you's had both kids, or if both of you have had a kid, or how do you... I was talking to someone the other day who said they are very, very, very strict with their partner, that they take it in turns to put their son to bed every night. But having read Wife, she's wondering if maybe that's not such a good idea, because you know, it's normal for kids to have a preferred parent or more bond or whatever. So what I wanted to do was say, yes, of course, it's a brilliant thing if gay people can be open and if gay people can have kids. I'm the last person who would say that's not a good idea. But just because it's a good thing doesn't mean it's a pure thing or an uncomplicated thing. It depends on the people involved. And part of the reason Zoe's in this terrible mess on the last day of the relationship is, so when a woman and a man have kids and then they split up, custody is a nightmare. So how bad is it going to be when there are 3 parents involved? And when one of the kids was gestated by a different woman? I mean, there's so much scope.
Legally.
Everythingly. So because I want to write about people in pressurized situations, I remember I read a quotation by Stephen King who said that he writes characters into a sort of impossible situation and then watches them try to work their way out. And I suppose that's actually what I do. That's literally what you do. Because I put them in a pressure cooker and then I turn up the heat and I do actually have a pressure cooker, so I do know what I'm talking about. And it gets to the point where something has to give. And in Wife, we are sort of reading about where something's got to give, but we don't know how it's going to fall, because Penny still has so much control. Even when she's not in the house, she has so much control. So we don't know how Zoe, who is, you know, she's the worm who turned, but we can't imagine how she's going to have the strength to do anything about it.
The other topic you write about a lot is gardening. Your gardening, specifically your gardens. You've written a column for The New Yorker, you are now writing one for The Observer, and it just occurred to me that the way you write about your gardening is a little bit like your fiction. You take something very private, which is your garden, and make it public. You open it up to anyone. Is that something you love to do?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I don't think of gardening as private. I think of it as, I suppose, it's something I do in private, but I don't mind people seeing it. I don't feel shy about it. Whereas the thing about fiction is you can write about incredibly intimate things that have happened to you, that have happened to other people. And it's not exactly... it's such an interesting thing. Okay, here's what I think. Gardening isn't private, it's solitary and it's personal. But I'm happy for anyone to see what I'm doing, happy to write about it, happy to talk about falling over all the time in it, happy to talk about how joyously I get covered in mud on a daily basis. Writing is completely different. Writing is hilariously private. Writing is something that I can barely bring myself to talk about whatever it is I'm writing in. Well, I can't really. And I find it hard to accept praise, and I find it embarrassing to talk about. They're really different for me, actually. I suppose in a way, writing is my heart and gardening is my outside. But I do, and it's also... I have hardly written about gardening in fiction. The Exhibitionist, where there's a bit of hot outdoor sex, and Wife, where there's some, well, the bit I just read, are the first books, because otherwise I'm at risk of sort of hijacking my novels to write about gardening, and that would be bad. A sort of, a merry gardener in breeches. So I do keep them really separate. But writing about gardening is so much easier than writing fiction, because I just talk about whatever I'm obsessed with. So it's wonderful. It's just like having a massive rant at a fellow enthusiast about tomatoes. Whereas fiction, you're inventing. My daughter calls it writing little stories for my little friends. It's fiction. You are sitting there making stuff up. It's a ridiculous job. So
and what are you making up right now?
Well, I can't possibly talk about it, as I think I've made clear. I can't... It's such a weird... it's such a weird thing, writing fiction, because you are building and getting into the air and keeping going. Just sort of bubbles, candy floss. It's a thing you've made up, but it has to be completely plausible. Every detail of where they live, what their jobs are, who they're related to, who their friends are, how they get to work, everything has to be absolutely watertight. And then you have to make up complicated inner lives for them. I find it incredibly difficult. But, I'm still here.
Charlotte Mendelson, thank you so much for joining us on Shop Talk with Writers.
Thank you for having me. Can we just go on for a few more hours? I could, quite happily. I want to go on for a few more hours.
Did you enjoy that?
I really did.
By the way,
yours was very good.
Did you make that? Thank you for listening to this episode of Shop Talk with Writers. Wife by Charlotte Mendelson is published by Picador. If you're a fan of this author or any other writers we feature on this podcast, please let us know your thoughts about their books and about this conversation. We'd love to hear from you in comments on Spotify, Instagram, Apple, or on my Substack. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and will share it with friends. Tune in again soon for exciting new episodes with authors Julian Borger, Arifa Akbar, Anne Morgan, and many more. Thank you.